Hi, lovelies. More than 3 million people in Britain are technically millionaires. That sounds extraordinary, but when you strip out the family home, when you remove the house price inflation, when you stop counting the property they live in, the number collapses. According to HMRC data released in 2024, there were just 5,070 ISA millionaires in the entire United Kingdom at the end of the 2022-23 tax year. 5,070 out of a working adult population of more than 34 million people, fewer than one in every 6,700 workers. And what stayed with me when I saw that figure was not how rich those people must be. It was this. They had access to the exact same ISA allowance as everybody else. Same wrapper, same tax rules, same £20,000 annual limit. But somewhere along the way, their money started behaving differently. When I worked in banking, I used to sit across from people who genuinely believed investing was something wealthy people did later, after the mortgage, after the kids, after life calmed down. And for most people, that later never arrived, because Britain accidentally created millions of property millionaires. ISA millionaires were built deliberately. And if any of this sounds familiar, you are not the only one. The number is tiny. This is the part that surprises people most. ISAs are not rare. Almost everybody in Britain knows what one is. Millions of people have opened them. According to HMRC, around 12 million adults contribute into ISAs every year. But fewer than 5,100 have crossed £1 million inside them. That gap matters, because it tells you something immediately. The issue is not access, it is behaviour. And when HMRC looked deeper into those ISA millionaires, another pattern appeared. Around 94% of them had built their wealth primarily through stocks and shares ISAs, not cash ISAs, not savings accounts. Investments, quietly, consistently. For years, that part matched what I saw behind the counter. The people building meaningful wealth were rarely making dramatic financial moves. Most of them look financially quite ordinary from the outside. No designer clothes, no flashy cars, no obsession with appearing wealthy. But underneath the surface, money was moving differently. I remember one customer who came into the branch every few months to move money into an investment account. Not huge amounts, a few £100s at a time. What stayed with me was how boring it looked. No excitement, no panic, no trying to double his money. Just quiet repetition. At the time, it almost looked too simple to matter. Years later, I realised that was exactly why it worked. The mortgage ate the ISA, the part that is deeply British, because for decades, Britain trained people to believe the house was the investment. And in many ways, it worked. House prices exploded. Equity grew, people felt wealthier. But what I kept seeing behind the counter was this. The mortgage absorbed almost every spare pound before investing ever had a chance. I remember a couple in their 30s who came in to discuss increasing their mortgage payments. Good salaries, careful people clearly trying to do the right thing. And when we looked at the numbers together, something became obvious. Every spare pound they had was disappearing into the mortgage, the house renovation, the kitchen, the driveway, the furniture financing. Everything went into the property. Nothing went into investments, and they were not unusual. According to the Office for National Statistics, Wealth and Assets survey published in 2025, around 40% of total household wealth in Great Britain is tied up in property. Only around 14% sits in financial assets. That means most British wealth exists inside walls. Not accounts, not investments, not accessible money. And psychologically, property feels safer because people can see it. They walk through it every day. ISAs feel abstract, slow, invisible, so people kept feeding the mortgage instead. Not because they were foolish, because culturally, that is what Britain taught them wealth looked like. Then lifestyle inflation took the rest. Even when incomes rose, the ISA often still lost, because something else expanded first. Lifestyle, this was one of the clearest patterns I saw at the bank. Someone would get a pay rise. And within a year, the car payment increased, the holidays improved, the subscriptions multiplied, the house costs expanded to match the salary. The surplus disappeared before it ever reached investing. I remember a man in his 40s who came in after receiving a significant promotion. Excellent salary, objectively doing very well. But when we reviewed the account, almost all the additional income had already been absorbed. A newer car, more expensive gym, higher restaurant spending, more finance purchases. And what struck me was this: he genuinely did not feel richer because the lifestyle had expanded at the same speed as the income. That is one of the reasons ISA millionaires are so rare, not because people never earned enough, because the surplus never survived long enough to compound, and compounding only works on money that remains invested, not money constantly redirected back into lifestyle. If any of this feels uncomfortable, that is normal, because most people were never taught how wealth actually forms. They were taught how to earn, not how to retain surplus, and the people who worried me most behind the counter were rarely the lowest earners. It was the people who looked successful, but had quietly built lives where almost every pound already belonged to something. Those accounts often looked impressive from the outside. Inside, there was no margin at all. ISA millionaires were built through repetition. This is where people often imagine something dramatic happened. A lucky stock, a huge inheritance, perfect market timing. Usually it was much less exciting than that, and far more repeatable. The people who built large ISA balances typically did one thing relentlessly. They kept contributing through good years, bad years, market crashes, political chaos, interest rate changes. They kept going. Research from Vanguard and Fidelity consistently shows that regular long-term contributions outperform most attempts to time markets, and that matched what I saw in real life too. The people building wealth were rarely reacting emotionally to headlines. They automated the behavior and removed the drama. I remember one woman who increased her ISA contribution every time she received a pay rise. Not massively, just gradually. £20 more, £50 more, nothing dramatic. But over 15 years, those small increases became enormous. That is the part people underestimate. ISA millionaires were rarely built through intensity. They were built through consistency, surviving long enough. Most people started too late. This may be the most expensive part of the whole story, delay. I heard this constantly from customers in their 20s and 30s. I'll start investing once things settle down. After the wedding, after the kids, after the house move, after the promotion. Always after something. And what most people never realize is that compounding is brutally sensitive to time. Not intelligence, not excitement. Time according to AJ Bell calculations, someone investing £300 a month from age 25 at an average 7% annual return could potentially build more than £500,000 by retirement. Wait until 40 to start. The outcome collapses dramatically. That is why delay matters so much. Not because people are lazy, because the early years carry disproportionate weight. I remember a customer in his late 50s saying something that stayed with me. If I'd known how important starting early was, I'd have invested before I bought the second car. Not because the car ruined his life, because small decisions repeated over decades quietly shape everything. And by the time many people realize that, compounding has already lost 20 years. The people who made it looked calmer. This was the part I noticed most. The people with meaningful investment wealth often behave differently emotionally around money. Calmer, less reactive, less obsessed with appearances. I remember one customer who technically could have afforded a much more expensive lifestyle, but she never seemed interested in proving anything. No panic around interest rates, no constant anxiety around bills, no obsession with house prices rising. She had built substantial ISA wealth over time, and what struck me was not the money itself, it was the emotional stability surrounding it, because liquid wealth behaves differently from property wealth. You can access it, use it, adjust it. It creates flexibility, and flexibility changes how money feels. That is the emotional difference I kept seeing between people who looked wealthy and people who actually had accessible financial freedom building underneath them. What the ISA millionaires did differently, the difference was rarely one giant financial decision. Usually it was a system, a structure, a behavior repeated quietly for years. They tracked spending, protected surplus, avoided unnecessary debt, invested consistently, started earlier, increased contributions gradually, stayed invested when markets frightened everybody else. None of it was glamorous. None of it looked exciting on social media. But according to HMRC, just over 5,000 people in Britain crossed £1 million inside an ISA, and almost all of them did it through investments, compounded patiently over time, not through hype. Through behaviour. That is the part most people never see, because Britain produced millions of accidental property, millionaires, but ISA millionaires were built deliberately. Most people spend years chasing the appearance of wealth, the house, the car, the lifestyle, and sometimes those things genuinely do create wealth. But what I kept seeing behind the counter was this. The people who felt safest financially were rarely the people trying hardest to look wealthy. They were the people quietly building assets they could actually access, the separate account, the regular investment, the monthly contribution nobody else saw. That was the real shift. Not appearing rich, becoming financially resilient, because wealth is not the number attached to your house. It is the gap between panic and stability when life becomes uncertain, and the people who built that gap usually started earlier, lived slightly below what they could afford, and repeated simple behaviours far longer than most people thought mattered. Slow down, think clearly, and that's how you start to love your money.